Hey guys, welcome back to Clownfish TV. This is Kneon. I am not here with Geeky Sparkles in this video. She is out and about today, but we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons and the utter state of tabletop and the media actually agreeing with us for a change. This is coming from The Guardian. They said, stop trying to turn Dungeons and Dragons into a Marvel cash cow. And this is on top of some more controversy around D&D Beyond. And a lot of people are getting tired of Hasbro and their handling of Dungeons and Dragons. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about kind of where they're at, Hasbro, kind of commercially and politically. Of course, I did a video a couple of days ago talking about how Hasbro is choosing to celebrate the 50th anniversary of D&D by making all kinds of changes to the game to stick it to the chuds, right? We'll talk about that. We'll talk about sort of the history of chud sticking, I guess, and when all of this kind of happened in tabletop. It's been going on for a while. There's been a lot of discussion around Warhammer and some of the retcons that they've been making, but the groundwork for this was laid years ago, and you'll never guess what year things really kicked off. Hint, it was an election year. We're going to talk about this. Before we get into it any further, please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants. Guys, let's see. Let's go talk about this first. Now, we did a video before talking about how they are trying to turn D&D into a lifestyle brand, right? Did you guys see this? The D&D black milk stuff, D&D dresses that you can buy. And, we have D&D cookbooks, and we have all kinds of D&D stuff that has nothing really to do with the game. I love how they throw straw on the back of, was this a kimono? I don't know. But they're trying to turn it into a lifestyle brand like Marvel. And when you do that, you alienate your core audience, which I hate to break it to you. Wizards of the Coast. I really hate to break it to you, and I know that they really don't like these people very much, but it is mostly straight white dudes historically who played D&D, and I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just saying that was kind of the core audience at first. Now, to be fair, D&D has become a lot more organically diverse, and even back in the day when I played in California, we had different kinds of people playing D&D, but historically, when you think of D&D, it's a bunch of white nerds in the basement, playing D&D back in the 80s or whatever. Like that scene from E.T., right? And everybody's smoking because that's what we did. Freaking babies were smoking and dogs were smoking. Everybody smoked in the 80s. But we're going to talk about this because in chasing this lifestyle brand, which is what Hasbro wants to turn D&D into. They are actively chasing off their core audience in so many ways. And look, it's a balancing act. You can make the old fans happy and still create stuff for new fans. But no, Hasbro's just like, you know what? Let's just get rid of all the old fans and make D&D dresses, then shoes, then purses, and we're gonna use AI to generate endless modules from here until the end of time. It's like, what are you thinking? This is The Guardian, which is a pretty far left publication. Stop trying to turn Dungeons and Dragons into a Marvel-esque cash cow. It's not gonna work. The way that Wizards of the Coast is treating this venerable game is totally at odds with how its players see it. Imagine that. The words hit players of the world's favorite tabletop role-playing game like a magic missile straight to the heart. Dungeons & Dragons has never been more popular, and we have really great fans and engagement, said Cynthia Williams, former CEO of D&D in December 2022 at the investor-focused web seminar, but the brand is under-monetized. Yes, I think a lot of this can be traced back to Cynthia Williams. Cynthia Williams, who came from Microsoft, just like her boss, Chris Cox, and they want to turn Dungeons & Dragons into a shitty mobile app. And they're making a lot of really bad decisions. In the run-up to D&D's 50th birthday this year, the branded tat has flowed with a vengeance. Could have been worse. The branded taint, the branded twat. I don't know. Amid the ongoing celebration, Cynthia Williams' comments have acquired the ring of a terrible prophecy coming to a fruition in the tackiest way imaginable. D&D is monetizing as never before, and it's terrible to behold. Ow! Again, this is The Guardian. This isn't a political thing. This is not a political thing. I think politics are at play to some degree, but this isn't a political take. This is just not D&D. You know, I could argue that D&D hasn't been D&D in over a decade plus, but the way that they're treating D&D like it is just a lifestyle brand. Wizards of the Coast, part of Hasbro, has unveiled a Dungeons & Dragons Lego set with a dragon-sized price to match. Converse sneakers deal with designs inspired by the original D&D handbooks, and we'll talk about that because now they are retconning that. Well, these aren't the originals. The red box is the most famous version of original D&D, hands down, but it wasn't the first version of D&D. These products join an ever-expanding deluge of merchandise. Roll up for your D&D breakfast bowls, table lamps, and Dragonfire Roast single origin coffee. Spaceballs, the merchandise. Merch is the key component of 21st century geekdom. Lego, sneakers, and table lamps are precisely the sort of products you would expect to accompany, say, a new Avengers or Star Wars movie. It's part of what we might call the Baby Groot economy. I can't think of that, but the Baby Groot economy. D&D isn't Marvel. And trying to monetize the brand, Wizards has made a terrible misjudgment. So basically, they're like, Wizards is trying to Disney Dungeons and Dragons, and it's not working. And this is why they fired. I'm sorry, she didn't step away on her own. They fired Cynthia Williams because this is a disaster. She also laid a bunch of people off from Wizards, D&D, and yeah, it's a mess. We're going to talk about more of this monetization failure. Wizards has made a terrible misjudgment. In that notorious web seminar, Williams lamented that while Dungeon Masters, players who referee gaming sessions, make up 20% of the user base, they account for the bulk of the spending. Yes, as someone who is always the Dungeon Master, I don't think I've ever actually, I'm thinking back and I'm like, I don't think I've ever actually played D&D. Maybe when I was younger and I was just starting, but as long as I can remember, even as a teenager, I was always the dungeon master, and 9 times out of 10, I had to buy the books. But I didn't mind buying the books because I liked having the books. And I had, oh my God, I had so much from first and second edition D&D. I had like almost everything. I mean, I had pretty much almost everything. And like 95% of that stuff I never used because our group just kind of made it up as we went. So I really didn't use these books. And I sold them for a lot of money. I got married and I'm like, yeah, I'm probably never going to have time for this again. I sold those books and some of them were in pristine condition. And even back then, they sold for quite a lot of money, like my Dark Sun set. And, I had some of the first edition handbooks that were barely used because I went right from first edition to second edition. But like, I mean, I'm just saying, like, I wish I had that stuff now. It'd probably be worth a lot more than it is. D&D isn't Marvel. In trying to monetize the brand, she made a misjudgment. Joining her on the call, Hasbro CEO Chris Cox, which is her boss, again from Microsoft, outlined a plan to turn D&D into a 4-quadrant brand that has similar awareness to Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter. No, that's not what we want. And they did a movie, and the movie failed. The movie actually was pretty good, but the people behind the movie shot their mouths off, and they did some anti-marketing, and the movie failed. What neither appears to understand is D&D can never be the next Harry Potter. That's because D&D is not a franchise, lifestyle brand, or a marketing opportunity. It's a community of people who largely make up their adventures for themselves. And you can't monetize that. For all the recent hoopla around the game, the D&D experience is essentially unchanged since it crawled out of the basement of Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson in 1974. They're actually giving them credit. I thought they were just a couple of white dudes from the Midwest. Again, we'll talk about this. To celebrate the 50th anniversary of Dungeons & Dragons, WotC employees felt it was necessary to point out what a bunch of bigots and racists made D&D and how progressive it is. And again, I think this is all part of the same thing. I think it's part of the lifestyle brand playbook, instead of the player's guide or the dungeon master's guide, you've got the lifestyle brand playbook where you say these things publicly in the hopes that somebody goes out and buys your stuff, buys your dresses and your jackets and your shoes and your purses and your waffles. If they could get away with D&D waffles, they'd probably have them. It's about pals coming together every week. They hang out, chuck dice, and share the thrill of exploring an abandoned dwarf mine or rescuing a cousin of one of the party from the cultists camped out in the woods outside town. It's happening in real life now. You don't need to play D&D like. But anyway, you can't put a price on that. It's like trying to monetize friendship. That new D&D Lego set is an example of how little Wizards and Hasbro understands the player base. At first pass, the Red Dragon's Tale box set seems full of promise. Features a brick fortress, a huge dragon, square-headed adventurers, and some iconic D&D monsters. There's even a tie-in adventure that uses the figures. You're thinking, oh, D&D Lego, what a fantastic way to get kids into the hobby. The catch is the luxury box costs £314. Roughly the cost of 6 players' handbooks. And those players' handbooks are not cheap. They're a lot more expensive than they were when I played. Wizards' problem is they already burned through much of the goodwill of its user base after a controversy last year over plans to reverse a policy going back to 2000, taking away the freedom for independent creators to use D&D's rules. However they saw fit. That'd be the OGL 1.1 debacle, which was a huge, huge, huge blow to Wizards. Basically, they were like, anything you make, we can just like take it. You can't, you got to work out a deal with us to split profits on any modules or, supplements that you create. Yeah, I know that we said we'd never do that, but we totally did. Leaked proposals showed that Wizards intend to demand a 25% royalty on the income of creators with annual sales exceeding $750,000, reserve the right to reuse any content created under the license. Big gaming was coming for the little guy. And I think they were looking at people like, Critical Role. They're like, well, how many millions of dollars a year do these guys make playing D&D? And then they just went and started their own system. Now, I've heard their system's not that great, but they were the biggest cheerleader for Dungeons and Dragons, and they noped out. So what I'm saying? So what does that say about the state of the hobby? There was an outcry, and Wizards eventually backed down. 12 months later, the 50th anniversary of D&D is here, and it feels telling how Wizards is marketing it with Legos and sneakers. Yeah, Legos and sneakers, and we're going to stick it to the chuds. I talked about this before, that for the 50th anniversary, this is a 50th anniversary celebratory set. And what they're doing is they're making a WizKids miniature of the classic warrior on the cover of the red box. Even if you're not familiar with D&D, you might be familiar with this image. This image right here. This image right here is probably the single most iconic D&D cover art image of all time. Even if you don't know Dungeons and Dragons, you have probably seen this on a t-shirt or on a poster. I have a coaster that has the red box on it. My son got me coasters. It's a very, very, very famous image. And the warrior, the faceless warrior is, now when I was a kid, I thought it was War Duke, but the helmet's different. But they've already made action figures of this warrior. It's been established that the warrior was male. Larry Elmore himself, the artist, said the warrior was male per Gary Gygax, co-creator of Dungeons and Dragons. He confirmed it. It's a male warrior. Well, to celebrate the 50th anniversary of D&D, this is how they celebrate it. They decide to have a gender reveal. That, oh, no, because you saw the back of the warrior. It's actually a thick brown woman. So I think what the subliminal message is, that, okay, you chuds had your white dude warrior for the first 50 years, but going forward, D&D is going to be a lot more inclusive and diverse. And it's interesting because this article calls out the corporatism of it, and that's what this is all about. They said that it just feels like just a very cynical cash grab. The reason, and I used to think it was all political. I think it is to some degree, but the reason that tabletop has gone nuts, and D&D in particular, I think is they're just trying to increase their user base, because you can't turn D&D into a lifestyle brand if it's a bunch of middle-aged white guys in the basement, right? Because they're not going to buy this. Your dad or your uncle is not going to buy this shit that they want to sell. I'm not going to rock a Ravenloft kimono. Is that what that is? I don't know. I'm definitely not wearing this. I don't have the legs for it. But you know what I'm saying? Like, so to sell this kind of shit that they want to sell, they have to build a more diverse user base. And I the cynic in me says this plan went into action years ago, and that this actually was behind the push for diversity, equity, and inclusion in D&D. It wasn't organic. It was designed like, well, we need bigger numbers. We need women, and we need minorities, and we need more LGBTQ people and whatever, because we need people to actually buy fashion shit to become fans of D&D, because we're going to, in 5 to 10 years, we're going to monetize the shit out of them. We're going to get these people in. These are the same people that are playing mobile games or whatever, and they're just casual like Marvel. Yeah, we need the casuals. The thing is, it was a disaster for Marvel. It was a disaster for Star Wars. And it's a disaster for Dungeons and Dragons, because you did just give your fans the finger on so many levels. I mean, the OGL thing was a huge deal. WotC sent the Pinkertons after a guy who got some magic cards early. So much damage. But I do think that a lot of this insanity around, race and gender ideology and toning down D&D to be as inoffensive as possible isn't because they actually feel this way. It's because it's a corporate decision. They want to sell as much shitty merchandise to as many stupid people as they possibly can. So they have to increase the numbers. And a lot of people that are going to buy this stuff, they're tourists. People that buy the Marvel shit, the Beckys and the Susans and the Karens that buy the Marvel stuff and the stupid Porg purses and all the shit that they're selling, Disney sells. They're not actually, a lot of them are not actually fans of the franchise. Or they're new. They just walked in. Oh, I like Porgs. They're cute. So I'm a Star Wars fan. I watched a couple of Marvel movies with my boyfriend. I'm a Marvel fan. They don't actually read the comics. I mean, to be fair, there are men out there too that are all, fake geeks or whatever, but there are a lot of them. I'm going to say, more and more, I'm like, you guys actually read the comics? I don't know if you've actually read the comics, but this is not what the core audience of D&D is. And it's, I think it's funny when you've got the Guardian calling you out, then you've fucked up. But yeah, going back to Warhammer. Did I even talk about Warhammer? This has been going on in tabletop for a while. I know Grumps put a tweet out yesterday, actually retweeting my video on the Redbox debacle, but Warhammer 40K is under fire now. And a lot of people think that the changes, the retcons or whatever, it's a corporate thing. They're doing it because they want to make Amazon happy because they got a TV show coming. But they've been attacking tabletop gaming for years. I mean, this, Warhammer 40,000 is growing fascism problem from Boing Boing. We've got Warhammer 40K's slip from a satire of fascism to a love letter to it. We've got Kotaku. Wonderful Kotaku. Resurgence of fascism forces Warhammer to remind fans the Imperium are villains. Guys, this one from Gizmodo, another wonderful publication. Warhammer 40K's creators needed to renounce real monsters long ago. The company made a statement reminding players its fictional monsters aren't aspirational after a scandal at a major tournament in Spain. One guy showed up. I think, if I remember the story correctly, one guy showed up with a swastika on his jacket. And because of it, the media used that opportunity to demonize the entire Warhammer fan base as fascists. But I'm telling you what's probably going on here. And some people in the comments, I put this up last night. Some people in the comments are very correct. They think it's corporatism. They think it's just like Dungeons and Dragons. They think they want 40K to go mainstream, with the Amazon show with Henry Cavill, if they're still doing it. So they're retconning Warhammer. They're putting out statements because eventually they're going to put Warhammer on a dress, in a purse, and pumps. You think I'm kidding? I never in a million years thought that this would have happened with Dungeons and Dragons. If you told me this was going to happen with Dungeons and Dragons when I was a kid, I would have laughed and laughed and laughed. But they're going to do this. They have this Amazon show with Warhammer. They're gonna put Warhammer on a dress. They're going to put it on a kimono. They're going to put it on a purse. They're going to put it on pumps. They're going to make Warhammer tea if they don't make it already. Warhammer coffee. Warhammer the flamethrower. I would buy that. I would buy Warhammer the flamethrower. But look, this is kind of going back to when it started. So I think it was 2016. Of course, it's 2016. 2016. The Mary Sue. Not my God, Emperor. Why are there so many actual fascists in the Warhammer 40K fandom? I think what happened was we had activists in the tabletop scene already for a variety of reasons. Basically, a lot of theater kids and whatever got into it. A lot of people from Tumblr because of Critical Role. Again, I'm not blaming Matt Mercer. Met him before. He's a nice guy. But Tumblr is Tumblr, right? And we had a lot of people get into D&D thinking it was just, make-believe. It's just like, oh yeah, we just make it up as we go, which I guess you do to some degree, but whatever. And then they kind of bled over into other tabletop games. Now the scene, I'm going to be honest, there are some really, really great people in tabletop, but there are some really, truly awful people in tabletop, and the convention scene is a mess. And it's highly political. And yeah, I think it all goes back to 2016 and probably before. People's minds broke. And they wanted a reason to go after Warhammer because Warhammer, Games Workshop wouldn't bend the knee. But now they're bending the knee because they have a show coming out. And it does feel corporate. But then because these media outlets kept pounding on Warhammer, they had to make a statement. I think it wasn't in their book. It was in one of the books, I thought, that they had to make a statement like, if you're a Nazi or a racist, we don't want you playing our game. How do you know what people do with your game once they buy it? Seriously. Like, you could go buy Monopoly and turn it into like some kinky furry shit at home. You know what I'm saying? Like, you have no idea what somebody's going to do with your game once they buy it, right? But they had to come out and make a statement because the media just kept hammering on Warhammer. They just kept after them. And it was kind of like D&D too. There are multiple hit pieces on Dungeons and Dragons and its history of racism and misogyny and exclusion and all of that. And yeah, again, how they celebrate the 50th anniversary of D&D by throwing the creators under the wheels of the bus. Actual WotC employees were like, yeah, well, they didn't really know better. They're just basically a couple of hicks from the flyover state. Har, 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 har. But thankfully, we're a lot more progressive now. And go watch that video. It was pretty disgusting. Like, this is how you celebrate the 50th anniversary of D&D, by throwing the creators and the fandom under the wheels of the bus, and then changing the iconography. It's a surprise, everybody. Surprise. And they said it was done purposefully and clearly. Purposefully and clearly, they made it a woman. Yes, they made it a woman, a thick brown woman, because they want you to know, chuds, that this is the next 50 years of D&D. The thing is, I don't think D&D is going to last another 50 years because Hasbro fundamentally does not understand their audience. They do not understand what D&D is, and a lot of players, D&D is just kind of the colloquial term for tabletop now. RPGs. A lot of people claim they play D&D, but they're actually playing another system, or they're playing kind of a homebrew version of D&D. And yeah, I think that players are going to move on from D&D, and you can try to turn it into a lifestyle brand. You can try to Disney it. It's not going to stick. D&D is damaged goods at this point. And yeah, Cynthia Williams got gone. She needed fired a year before they actually got rid of her. So I'm going to wrap this up, guys. Please subscribe. We'll talk later.